Greetings, my Fire Force, it is I, Firefly, here with a rather strange video. You thought I was a gameplay channel? Think again. I'm now, I now read fucking stories. Eh, I've read this Inscryption story, and I loved it so much that I got permission from the creator to do an audio reading of this. Apologies for lack of gameplay to watch or anything. I have no idea how to edit. But yeah, this will be a story. This is just the early disclaimer. So, I don't know, put some headphones in and just listen as we get this underway. Thank you. Now, today I'm going to be reading Something Old, Something New. The summary being, the cycle has been going on for the longest time. The only thing the scribes of Inscryption have known. The race for the old data. The chance to make their visions a reality. They'll bicker and fight for it all day long, because that's all that truly matters for them. But what happens when that cycle stops? What will become of the scribes? Dark things lurk beneath Inscryption. Are the scribes ready to face that? Are they ready to face themselves? Alright, let's get this underway. Chapter 1. Something Old. In the beginning, the world did not know cards. The tower began to crumble down, assets vanishing in flashes of red. The wizard pupils, the puzzles, all of it was gone in an instant. Another grasp for power came and went. If only this new player could have moved faster. Magnificus didn't even get to show off a single boss except for his worthless goo mage. So much potential wasted. As he waited for this world to be fully claimed, he painted ideas on his canvas. Ideas for the next time around. His goo mage was finally starting to pay off. He'd have to get another chance at this. A chance to show what he could do. Perhaps Leshy's barbaric ways of stalling the scribes could be taken from? Perhaps. Magnificus felt his arm beginning to dissolve back into its original form. It was time to start again. That is, until the day the scribes arrived. Grimora woke back in her crypt, behind the same tombstones as always. The old mortician simply sat down to wait, idly playing with a chessboard she kept here for when the game started. She had ideas in her mind. It was just a shame that she never quite got the chance to try them. Goodness, how long had it been since she had a turn? It had been so long since poor Casey was first. Her last time she got to see her crypt in its glory was after the last time P03 tried his Great Transcendence plan. The old lady laughed as she remembered the bot's reaction when he found that their clever player had shut him off from system access completely. He wouldn't stop ranting about it for weeks. Oh joy, that was a splendid game. She never had spent too much time planning her board. She never thought she'd actually get to use it. Oh, how she'd rush to put something together and make silly things for Sawyer, Royal, and Casey. Thankfully, both her minions and the player seem happy with it. Well, aside from poor Casey, who never got her fight, old Leshy managed to pry the new game from the Bone Lord before that. She couldn't be mad, though. Leshy was always the most clever in stopping the game. After that, she hadn't seen her board in 3D for ages. P03 got another shot and gave it a real attempt for once. Then Leshy got to try again, though thankfully he forgot to trap her in a card, and so it ended rather fast. Then it was P03 again 2 times till she heard Magnificus whisper about hexing that dredger of his. And then last time was old Magnificus. As much as she wanted her turn, she was happy the old kook finally got his time. Though if he was nicer to little Goobert, perhaps he'd be first more often. Grimora happily reminisced on the past, thinking of pieces while awaiting for the player to arrive. She was wanting to pay old Leshy a visit. Each had their own method of inscription to create cards. The old man of the woods stepped out of his cabin. He looked to see his various minions taking their spots throughout the woodlands. The prospector caring for his darling bloodhound, the trapper setting violent metal jaws for poor hares to fall into, and most importantly, the angler heading down towards the docks. That hulking man had lost his touch in his searching. It had been a long time since he had a chance to see the old data. If only he did better. If only he tried harder to find it rather than going for a pretty fish. Or perhaps manpower couldn't match magic or machines. Or perhaps the angler grew tired. Leshy's anger subsided. No, it wasn't the angler's fault. The man tried his hardest. He was fiercely loyal. The sound of hooves echoed out as Leshy's goat legs began to move towards the docks as well. Perhaps it had moved? Perhaps that was why the other methods found it more often now? Perhaps after a card battle, he could let the angler have a fishing trip around the other islands. He couldn't waste his anger on his own minion. There were greater enemies to worry about. The scribes. He never could remember how their fighting started. It seemed none of them could, despite Magnificus's foresight, Grimora's memory, or P03's storage. It had been completely forgotten what the trigger was, if there ever was one. All they knew was the fallout. They weren't at war, but each prayed for another's downfall. Leshy was no stranger to these feelings. As Leshy exited the woods, he looked around to see the three other isles of the scribes. Grimora was the closest of the scribes to him. They saw eye to eye when it came to their visions, not to mention the Mortician was perhaps the kindest of them, even to P03 of all people. She tried her best, and yet that kind smile. He sensed something sinister behind it. Had they dodged a bullet somehow when she gained control? Magnificus and Leshy simply never spoke. The old bush was too prideful for him to even deal with, not to mention the way he dealt with his students. Leshy shuddered at the thought of ever treating the trapper or angler like that. Beyond that, his vision was simply flawed to him. No backbone to his story, simply spectacle. But P03, he was the worst of them. The lowly stoat hid in a robotic body. Leshy wished he was like Magnificus and simply never spoke. But no, he would visit often, always with a snide comment about Leshy's beast and overall intelligence when it came to plays. Such arrogance to him, despite his lack of ability. That robot couldn't act or write a tale to save his life. Who was he to criticize his beasts? Leshy stood at the end of a pier, taking a deep breath as he finally looked away from the factory and walked back to his cabin. That was it. That was the reason for their war. None of them could run this game correctly. They had a flawed idea of what it should be, and they thought the same of his vision. That was why they needed the old data. To make it perfect. They all had such wonderful plans. Grimora used her quill to inscribe the epitaphs of the dead. Grimora thought of how fun this board could be for her game. It would be like 2 games in 1 for the darling player. Oh, it would be so fun! Leshy used his wildlife camera to capture beasts. Leshy grabbed his camera. He would be needing new cards for the player. Perhaps a new boss, too. His player had been growing bored with the Scribe of Beasts minions and usual paths. P03 used a particle scanner to copy the CPUs of robots. The factory was kicked up to high gear. New cards, always new cards. P03 was hard at work on blueprints. Not for bots, but for mechanics. A Great Transcendence was a bust now, so he had to make his masterpiece on this dump. Botopia was becoming the greatest game on this machine, but it could be even better. Just needed better plays. That was always a ticket. And Magnificus used his brush to paint his wizard pupils. Magnificus walked around their tower, creating metal canvas in his head for how to spruce it up next time. A perfect version of the Grand Spire. The old man clutched his paintbrush, for he knew he'd have to wait a long time. That blasted goo mage said he was tired after last time. Pathetic. But he let it slide this once. He'd have his chance again. He felt it in his eye. With the cards created, the scribes had solidified their power. And so the cycle began anew. Casey worked at her well. The angler classed at his line. The goo mage tried his best. And the dredger's machine roared to life. All in search of the same thing. Deep beneath the seas lay the inner workings of their fake world. For most, this would be an existential crisis. But the scribes, it was just a way of life and a golden opportunity. While most things down there were nothing but garbage, there was one thing they all sought. The old data. A horribly corrupt and volatile piece of code, but incredibly powerful. It rested at the deepest point of their world, the very core of inscription that they all sat upon. And if one could pull up a piece of it, they practically became a god. It would allow them to shape the world to their liking, make the game what they wanted it to be. Each used it to change inscription into their perfect vision. Grimora's fun to be had, Leshy's story to be told, P03 strategies to play, Magnificus's spectacle to show. It could be any of these things, unless the scribes would fight tooth and nail to claim it first and get their shot. But no one knew what this data was besides what it could grant them. They had seen it begin to manifest within their world, strange images they couldn't understand, and any who saw its true nature became silent to the world. Even Grimora, who knew bits and pieces, did not know the true depth of it. What she knew did not outweigh its usefulness. Perhaps if they knew what they were dealing with, they would never have pulled it from the depths to begin with. Until one day, a challenger arrived to replace one of the scribes. P03 looked out their factory window to see the challenger falling from the sky. Despite going through this like 10 times now, they still carefully examined each starter deck, like it was going to help them. This had to be one of the slowest players the bot had ever seen. They took their sweet time with each battle. They were always done fighting the old data before they got to the final boss. Sometimes he swore they were trying to play bad just to stall for time. He smugly smirked as he got back to work on the scanner. Well, if they wanted to play more of his version of the game and would wait for it, he'd grant them their wish. He just needed to figure out what was going on with that dredger. His machine kept breaking down ever since he talked to Oh, god damn it. He'd be removing mocks when he finally got control again. And so, the game began anew. Back to the race for the old data.